Well, I hope you guys are having a good day. This is not a very well planned out little video that I have today. This is pretty much just my thought process behind what I see in the future. So this is one of those videos that predicts how things will happen in the future, which typically are wrong. I'm a big fan of Nicholas Taleb, who's written books like Black Swan and Anti-Fragile, and he talks about the fact that, everyone's really bad at predicting things. Even those people that are well educated and have experience and a lot of other things, they're still pretty bad at predicting things. But here it goes. I'm making a prediction. So I'm a very religious man, and I wouldn't say religious as much as I love God, and I think He's active in my life, and He loves me very much, and He loves my children and my wife and my family. And one of the things that's always been, trying to work out in my head is exactly how religion comes together in all these things. So you know as well as I do, lots of things in religion have had pretty bad effects. There's been wars and people persecuted, and religion's been used to push down things that were more ethical. The Germans used religion during World War II to suppress some of the activities of those that didn't feel like they were being very nice to other people. It was used in slavery. There's lots of examples of how religion was used to persecute people. And now we're in an age where things seem to be changing a little bit. The world around us is changing, and we have these internet, and you can watch this video. Probably nobody will, but it's there if somebody wanted to. It'll exist probably long beyond my time, and people, you can see it, how people thought and felt and stuff like that. So if you go back to and this is where the prediction part comes in. So if you go back in the past of religion, if you look way back in when Jesus rose from the dead and He left behind His apostles, the religion started. There was a base, and that base was centered around Judaism and the Jewish faith, and spread through the tendrils of the Jewish people. And it was the fact that they had always been told them a Messiah would come, and Jesus met the Messiah criteria. Now, some people didn't want to believe that. Some people were like, "No, this is not the Messiah we expect. We expect a Messiah that's going to conquer the world and put Judaism, as much more prevalent among the strengths of the world." This was a different take. So some people say, "No, this isn't the Messiah." But there were some that did, and it spread out a lot in that vein. And then Paul came along, and Paul said, it's not just Jews, it's the Gentiles as well. And I'm sure that he wasn't the original person that thought that, but he probably said, I don't see why they wouldn't be part of this. And I'm sure there were other people thinking the same thing. So everybody knows that Paul spread a lot of stuff beyond the borders of Israel, or Judea and Israel at the time, and into the Roman areas, and spread it out like that. Well, that's number one. So Paul broke a foundation. The Jewish faith had a very strict guidelines on how it did things. And if you read a lot of Paul's writings, he writes a lot about that's not critical. That wasn't important. Being circumcised, strict diet, obeying all the laws. Said that's not what faith in God's all about. Faith in God is love of God, love of your fellow man as your neighbor. Love your neighbor as yourself. So those are a lot of what Paul wrote about. Paul was not known as a great speaker, motivational speaker, but he wrote some really good stuff that was able to spread out. Kind of interesting. It wasn't him that was the strength. It was his writings that spread out beyond him, that kind of shaped a lot of the early church in Rome when they read about his writings, and they said, here's an example. We think his stuff should be canon as well as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, because if you read it, it explains core fundamentals, that it's not about meeting the laws of the Jews who was doing that. Okay, so that's one big break. Law, Judaism, how it's done. Boom. Paul drops it up here, where the Gentiles could still eat pork and have their bacon and still be following Christ. Big change. You all are probably very familiar with the one of the other big changes that happened back in the days of Martin Luther, and when the church was using and abusing its powers of constricting Catholic religion to use it as a weapon or as a tool or an empowerment to force people to do things or turn over money and things of that nature. And Martin Luther shows up and says, no, it's about the Word, it's about this Bible. And after a while, we also had the press. We were able to print out the Word and print out the Bible. And again, another explosion happened. It went from the Roman Catholic Church to all the churches we have today. There's still the Roman Catholic Church, but there's a big expansion that happened among a lot of different Christian fellowships. So I'm wondering if what's going on right now, which is the breadth of the internet and the change that we're seeing in the fundamental understanding of how we touch things and how we react to things. There's so much that I can learn just by pressing a button on my computer. And people with expertise and people that said, these people sound good, boom. I now have a lot of knowledge that I didn't have. I didn't have to read it. I didn't have to go buy a book. It was free and accessible to me, and there it is. So we're at this point now where we have all these churches, and a lot of people, they go to seminary, they have degrees, they have all this doctrine, they have all this, like, I've studied the ancient languages, and I am the one that knows how you should have faith, and you should listen to me. And now they're still there. But that area is not growing as much. And I'm seeing a lot more early stuff that's being created in the web for God and Jesus, and it's looking very poignant. And I just wonder if this is the next boom, the next pop, where we stop being controlled by these different groups of churches, just like we stopped being controlled by just the Roman Catholic Church. And these churches now become more of a support mechanism than the actual place where you find out about God and faith. You can go to the internet and you can click a button and you can find out about what John was trying to express in his Gospels. You might even see it animated. There's some stories out there and videos and people doing demonstrations so that you can not only read it but maybe see it and see how it feels in your heart. This may be the next evolution of the Christian religion and what God wanted us to see and feel. That's my prediction. Now, one of the things that you're like, well, that's a nice prediction, you're kind of jumping there, but let me explain to you, it also makes me feel good in myself to think that may be the next thing that happens. I know my daughter, who's a very smart young lady, she's talked to me about the fact, oh, Dad, the religions are so dominated by problems and support of male doctrine and stuff like that. And there's always a male preacher and so. And I'm like, yeah, but that wasn't what Christianity was about. That's not what God is about. That's not what Jesus was about. That is not what Jesus wanted to do. That is just how they are managing it. That's how they are doing things. And even though Pope Francis, who I love to death, he's sounding like a great guy, even he's like, well, we're going to keep male priests because that's the way we've been doing it. We did it that way for the last thousands of years. We're going to keep doing it that way. I don't see any reason to alter. He's not being mean. He's not being callous. He's not trying to things, but he knows how things have gone. He wants them to keep going and make other modifications. He's not one of those guys that's just going to radically do a lot of stuff. Although he's trying to make a difference. I really do think he is a good man. The other thing, this is a personal thing that happened to me. Back when Jackie, who's now my wife, when we were first started dating, I was speaking with an associate pastor at my church. And he was like, tell me a little bit about this lady that you're going out with. And I explained to him that she was in a tough time legally because even though she'd been separated from her husband for many years, they still weren't divorced because of all the legal ramifications that were going on in international courts and all the other crap that was going on in her life. And he said, whoa, whoa, whoa. You're dating a married woman? And I went, yeah, legally she's married, but they were separated. And she hasn't even been in the same country with him for over 5 years. But, they can't get the divorce because of all this legal entanglements. Whoa, whoa, whoa. You can't be dating a married woman. Well, she's legally married, but in no sense of the word, she's not married to this man. It doesn't matter. You cannot be representing us in anything if you are not following your doctrine. And I was like, well, I'm not going to turn my back on this lady because I love her. I didn't know I loved her at the time, but I was pretty sure she was the one. Just because I loved being around her. But she was a good person. She loved God. She was building me up spiritually. She was inundating me with such positiveness in my life. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. What you're saying doesn't match with loving God and loving your fellow man. No, I'm not going to agree with that. And I told him, I said, well, maybe you should think about that and get back with me because I hear what you're saying, but that's not going to happen. He was an associate pastor. He went to talk to the pastor of the church. And the pastor of the church was like, whoa, this is not a typical thing. You cannot apply this very strict guideline broadly for everything. So he told him, back off. And he called me later and said, I talked to the pastor and he said, yeah, this is much more complex. There's a lot to this. Don't worry about it. Now, that's an example of harshness. There have been wonderful, wonderful, wonderful human beings I've met that were priests and pastors and associate pastors that have did nothing but lift me up. But that's an example of where he had some authority over me. Because I was enjoying helping the church. I was enjoying participating in activities that were for other people. I was leading devotions and I was doing some volunteer work for the church, and it was all through the church. And this one person's like, no, if you're going to be that way, I'm not going to let you do this anymore. He was using his authority over me. Now, a lot of times we do that to make the environment a supportive environment. So I understand why he may have reacted that way. But one of the things we have to remember as Paul told us in the Bible, it's not about whether or not we eat the right foods or whether we say the right things. It's all about the focus. It's about, do I have a focus on God? Do I have a focus on my neighbor? Do I love my neighbor as I would myself? And do I love God? So how could he have handled that differently? He would have said, wow, there's a lot in there about doing something like that. I would take a little time out and just pray about whether or not you're doing the right thing by this lady or if it's not. Because some of that hits me a little strange. But love God and you love her. Do what's right by her. But make sure you feel like you're God-led. That kind of individualism about attach yourself to God and attach yourself to your neighbor cannot be done on a wide church basis. And now we have the connectivity. We have neighborhood talks, and we have friends, and we have connections to individuals that are in our lives that we know are good and awesome. So I'm hoping my prediction is correct. This is the next evolution of the Christian faith. We're going to move away from forcing us to go to a church in order to find faith and love and things of that nature. And we'll find that love and faith through our connections with everyone around us. And that we will push the fact that we love God, and we love our neighbor. And that will bring even more people over to knowing that God loves them very much. I'm going to leave a link below. I don't know if it'll be active whenever you see this, but my pastor, Riverbend Church, Dave Haney, had a pretty good thing about that, about being a church. And when I say church, to me, it's like my house and me and my family. Being a church that's in the mix, that doesn't exclude people, that doesn't push people to having to believe something that they maybe not truly believe, of being in the real world, which is a little messy, and it's not always crystal clear what should and should not be done. So I'll leave you guys with that. Hope you have a wonderful day. Please keep me in your prayers. As always, I'm not a perfect man. I have a perfect God, and I'm trying to do the best I can by my neighbors and my family and my children and my wife and everyone else around me, even my puppy dogs. I try to take care of them as well. Hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.